Hey everyone, good to see you again today. So, let me start with something that honestly surprised a lot of people when it came out, and it might surprise you too. President Trump just rolled back tariffs on a ton of everyday foods, things like coffee, bananas, tomatoes, beef, even spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, because prices were climbing so fast that it was starting to hurt almost every household in the country. And now that this new executive order is out, the hope is that it finally gives people a little breathing room at the grocery store, and there's a lot more behind this story than most people realize. So it's worth sticking around to understand what's changing and why it matters so much. Before we get into everything, let me ask you something simple for the comments. What grocery item feels ridiculous to buy right now? The one where you look at the price and just shake your head. Everyone has that one thing. So let's talk about what changed because this wasn't a small tweak. This was a major course correction. And honestly, if you've been watching grocery bills climb month after month, this is one of those moments where the government is finally reacting to what people are feeling every single day. Now, the big headline is that President Trump just exempted a whole list of foods from the higher tariff levels he's been using for the past year. And this isn't just coffee and bananas anymore. It now covers cocoa, beef, tomatoes, avocados, oranges, pineapples, coconut products, teas, and a whole list of spices. Basically, a lot of the foods that families buy every single week or every single day were getting hammered by tariffs, and it pushed prices way beyond what most budgets could comfortably handle. And the interesting part is that the White House made this change after a lot of pushback, not from political opponents, but from regular voters. Exit polls earlier this month showed that people were overwhelmingly frustrated with affordability, especially grocery costs. And when you start losing voters in states you normally win, you start paying attention. So, yeah, this is absolutely tied to the election and to the pressure coming from people who are struggling at the checkout lane. So, then let's look at what exactly happened here. The executive order Trump signed doesn't get rid of all tariffs, but it does roll back the most painful ones, what they call reciprocal tariffs, which went anywhere from 10% all the way up to 50%. These are being removed for a long list of foods. And it's retroactive, meaning the lower tariff rate goes into effect starting from the day before the order was signed. That's how fast they want this to start flowing through the supply chain. And you might be thinking, okay, sure, tariffs went down, but were they really causing the prices to rise that much? And the answer is yes. With coffee and beef especially, the connection is almost direct. Let's talk about beef because this one shocked a lot of people. Over the past year, the US was charging major beef suppliers, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Uruguay, tariffs so high that Brazil's effective rate topped 75%. 75% that slowed down imports massively at the exact same time the US cattle herd dropped to a 75-year low because of drought and high feed costs. So you had low supply, high tariffs, and higher equipment and repair costs from tariffs on steel and fertilizer, and everything stacked up into a perfect storm. That's why uncooked beef products at the grocery store jumped anywhere from 12 to 18% in a single year. And what's wild is that ranchers weren't rebuilding their herds because the policy was so unpredictable. One month it's tariffs, the next month it's a beef quota expansion in Argentina. It made long-term planning almost impossible. So, the administration is now rolling some of that back to stop the bleeding. Now, let's talk coffee, because this one probably hits closer to home for most people. You know how everyone kept saying coffee felt more expensive this year? Well, it wasn't just inflation. The US slapped a 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee. And Brazil supplies about a third of all our coffee imports. That's huge. Vietnam, Colombia, and others were hit too. And it pushed coffee prices to a record $841 per pound in July, which is a 33% increase from the year before. That's not a small bump. That's a full-on spike. Growers started paying 18 to 25% more for their wholesale beans. Cafes added surcharges, and no one could avoid it because the US literally doesn't produce enough coffee. Some states grow tiny amounts, but not enough to matter. So, roasters and cafes had no choice but to pay whatever the tariff demanded. And here's the part that really pushed voters over the edge. The Tax Foundation estimated back in August that 74% of U.S. food imports were facing tariffs. That's almost three-quarters of the imported food you find in your grocery store. So when people walked in and saw higher prices on tomatoes, citrus, spices, coffee, bananas, beef, all at the same time, it was too much. Voters connected the dots, and the administration heard that message loud and clear. Now, what's more, tomatoes became their own crisis. Tomato prices jumped almost instantly when Mexico was hit with a 17% tariff after a trade agreement expired, and Mexico is one of our biggest suppliers. So that made everything from pasta sauces to salsa to fresh tomatoes more expensive almost overnight. So then, when you step back and look at everything together, this new tariff rollback isn't just a policy update, it's a complete shift in direction. For years, Trump said tariffs don't raise prices, but this move is an acknowledgement that yes, they do. And in some cases, they do so dramatically. Now, I want to pause for a second because this is where it gets personal for a lot of people. When you walk into the store every week, you don't need a government report to tell you prices are up. You don't need a chart. You feel it when you put coffee in your cart or pick up a tray of beef or grab tomatoes for dinner. So, when these tariff cuts hit the news, a lot of people felt finally something that makes sense. But here's the trick. Even if tariffs drop instantly, prices don't. There's a whole supply chain that needs time to adjust. Coffee beans already shipped at the old rate won't suddenly get cheaper. Beef that was imported under a 75% duty doesn't magically restock at a lower cost. So the real question is when you'll notice changes, and that part, it's going to be gradual. Maybe in the next few weeks for fast-moving goods like bananas, coffee, and beef might take longer. Some stores will pass the savings quickly, so might hold on to the margins for a bit, but the shift is starting now. The other thing to consider is what the administration is doing behind the scenes. They also just created a new trade framework with Switzerland that lowers tariffs from 39% down to 15%. This shows that the affordability push isn't just a one-off emergency move. It started to look like a broader strategy, something bigger than just a political reaction. Now, I want to bring this back to you. What does this mean for your weekly grocery bill? Well, if you buy coffee, beef, fruit, tomatoes, spices, honestly, almost anything that isn't grown locally, you're part of the group that might start seeing relief. Maybe it's 50 cents off bananas. Maybe it's $1 off beef. Maybe it's cheaper coffee beans at your favorite store. These don't sound huge individually, but when you're on a fixed income or even just trying to stretch a budget, these little breaks matter. And speaking of which, I just want to say you're not imagining the struggle. You're not overreacting. Food inflation has been crushing people, especially older adults, people on SNAP, retirees, and families living paycheck to paycheck. So seeing a move that directly targets the prices you pay every week is meaningful. Even if it's late, even if it's imperfect, it's still something. So then keep an eye on your usual items over the next few weeks. See if anything shifts, and if a store starts advertising lower prices on coffee or beef, you'll know it's the tariff relief starting to hit. And let me know in the comments what grocery item hit your wallet the hardest this year. I always enjoy reading your answers, and honestly, it reminds everyone they're not alone in this. Thanks for being here, and take care of yourself today.